holy death. Death in ancient Egypt. Images of death. Death as dismemberment. The Egyptian image of the body. Part 1. The image of death as dismemberment is derived from the Egyptian image of the body as a multiplicity of members joined through the connective medium of blood into a living unity, and b. from the counterimage of redemption from death through collecting, joining, uniting, and knotting together. Here, we touch on an area of extremely basic cultural attitudes, which Emma Brunner-Traut, in particular, has dealt with in studies that have major theoretical implications. In her influential book Fra Formen des Erkennens, Early Forms of Conceptualization, Brunner-Traut postulates a psychological, cognitive basis for certain, especially striking peculiarities of Egyptian art, which she sets in parallelism with other phenomena in Egyptian culture, as well as with the art of other primitive peoples and with forms of children's art. She groups these peculiarities together under the rubric of the aspective. This erudite concept, which is the opposite of perspective, designates a purely additive stringing together, or aggregating of elements without organizing, structuring principles that would make them appear to be parts of a superordinate whole. These peculiarities are particularly clear in Egyptian art. Brunner-Traut, though, would like to see in them a trait that reaches far beyond art and into Egyptian thought, perception, and conceptualization in general. According to her theory, Egyptians cast a dissecting glance at the world, one that perceived only individual details, and was incapable of seeing larger unities. In other words, they did not see the forest for the trees. Thus, in the case of the body, they saw a marionette, an aggregated multiplicity of individual limbs, not an organic whole controlled from the center outward. The body is put together, knotted together out of a number of parts. It is, so to say, what we call a marionette. In language, this dissecting style of thought is expressed in the lack of generic terms. Thus, for example, there is no word for world, cosmos, mundus. Instead, Egyptians said sky and earth. Egypt was Upper and Lower Egypt. Egyptian grammar has few conjunctions. The typical form of joining clauses is parataxis. Brunner-Traut qualifies Egyptian society as an aggregated society that had no structure, but was rather an aggregated mass of individuals, an agglomeration of individual persons. This mass was hierarchically assembled, to be sure, but no one could survey this whole and understand it as a unity and in its all-around functional interdependence. The hierarchic construct was not fitted together into a structure, but merely into an aggregate, an aggregation Latin Grex, herd of individuals, but not into an organic body in which all the parts are reciprocally related to one another and thus woven into a whole by means of warp and weft. These are astute observations. Without doubt, behind Brunner-Traut's concept of the aspective stand deep, far-reaching insights into certain central phenomena of ancient Egyptian culture and their inner relationship. The psychological, cognitive interpretation, however, is too one-sided. It is true that the Egyptians cast a dissecting gaze on the world, but at the same time, there was always a question of connective principles, and these were what mattered most to them.